Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing. I'm your host, Lon Gray, and thank you so much for joining us. Show number 536. This mid-November for us in the United States, our government has decided to not be shut down anymore, and everything's kind of trying to be reconstructed back in. Everybody's prime interest, of course, is how is that going to happen, how fast, and whether or not there's a salvageability to Thanksgiving travel from a flights perspective. I know we've talked about that on the show several times these past couple of weeks as to how to adaptively get around that, change strategies, what to consider, and so forth domestically for the United States. And then from that also is the ripple effect impact on travel uncertainty, income uncertainty, so forth, as people get back to work and get paid from a government perspective. Also, how does that instill the economy? They're saying that each week that the Florida government, not two, the U.S. government was closed, we were losing about $15 billion per week in gross domestic income. So lots to unravel as time goes forward with that. But that's not the topic of our show this week. Our topic of the show this week is a little bit of a continuation of a concept as to where we are from a marketing perspective. We talked very much granularly about fourth quarter these past couple of weeks because of the in front of us aspect of it going on. But we're about to roll into a new year. We're only 6 short weeks away from 2026. As weirdly close that sounds, there's a lot between now and then. But with new budgets and new year, there's always new perspective. We always go through this cyclic change as an industry, salespeople and operations people reevaluate the relationships of the current business. Is it in the path that they want? Companies reevaluate their teams as these are people we want to do things with. They reevaluate the size of their teams. We know that the budgeting forecast for next year is not as optimistic. Well, I say that every year we go through the dance of optimistic forecast and then actualization diminishment. This year was more dramatic than was even expected on that. Next year, they're even tempering their optimism, which doesn't bode well. Hopefully that is not the case, but we are in a business cyclic change. And as we talked about on the show before, a lot of the people that are now in the role of marketing managers, operations managers, sales managers, revenue managers have never been in this industry at a time of cyclic change. We've had impact changes like, lockdown with COVID. We, for those who are going farther back, the financial shutdown of 2008. And if you want to go even farther than that, the 2001. But if you look back, there has not been a progressive progressive change to our industry that is cyclic based, where there isn't something to point a finger at, say this event caused this, as so much as it is in general, this is what the industry is going through. We have more inventory always coming online. We have current inventory that's not fulfilling revenue expectations and so forth. So that is all the precursor to where we are now, what you can consider now, outside of all the holiday distractions we're about to have personally and professionally, business-wise. We have to prepare ourselves for what 2026 is going to be rolling in for whatever that may be. So there's a very common conversation that people have. It isn't just about this time of year. It's been pretty much in general these past few months in particular. But we want to talk about it today. Our topic today is no time to keep up and too costly to fall behind. Now that can be applied to our businesses, business operations. It can also be applied to us personally. I know with my interactions with my clients and historically with my interactions with my clients, everything's always based on the ability of value of result of the decision. Is too much time being spent on decisions that won't yield the value of that investment? A lot of times, people's times, because the labor force, we've talked about it, did not fully come back after the lockdown. We were already short going into the lockdown. It was exacerbated by the lockdown. So we came out of that with large gap points as to skill sets and resources. And if anything's a testament to that is our open willingness to try to embrace anything AI that would help us cover up some of our shortfalls of time and expense. I had a show not too long ago, 522, excuse me, talking about the fact that companies in their growth cycle get from what can we build to what can we get done? Because just like a tractor pull starts out great, slows down, gets stuck. Same two companies are now burdened with their own infrastructure, their own complexities of decision, their own gating of their of security. You know, nobody wants to make the decision to eliminate their own department. Nobody wants to allow another department to take over theirs. Nobody wants another department to become larger than theirs and theirs becomes lesser. Everybody tries to fight for their territory, so to speak, their sandbox. And that biases decisions. That's usually the first filter that all of us go through, the self-preservation filter. How's this affecting me? What is going to come out of this process for me? And then the next layer of it, and the things that I'm responsible for or engaged with, my team members, what have you. And that creates decisions that aren't always in the best of the larger entity, but are self-preservationist as to the security of the smaller entity. And through this process of bogging down to where you get very task-centric, you get very much about what is in front of you, what is the problem that needs resolution. A lot of times we don't have the resources or time to solve the real depth of the problem, the two problems that are always happening. And for those that watch the show know what I'm referring to pretty persistently is the current problem that needs to get resolved and the future problem so that this doesn't recur again. What can we do to fix this so it doesn't happen again? That one tends to get ignored, not out of willfulness, but out of necessity. A lot of times simply because the resource to do it or the cost to do it or the time to facilitate getting it done isn't justifiable to all of the other things that are going on currently right now that need attention and focus. There's too many whack-a-moles. There's too many small fires. We don't want it to get into a huge one. So we're more worried about the little fires now, and then we'll figure out later on how they all started so we can maybe stop it. Well, later on never happens really. Now with economies shifting and shrinking as to the resources available, no company's going, let's expand our service profile internally to fix some of these long-term problems. So really, the only time a long-term problem gets solved is when there's such a grand, overwhelming justification, overwhelming evidence that not fixing the long-term scale of a problem will cost more now and continue to cost until it gets resolved. That's when a long-term problem finally gets fixed. Let's take case in point. Let's keep it very realistic for a hotelier. Your individual air conditioning units in your limited service property have reached a threshold where a large enough percentage of them are non-repairable, and a very large portion of them are very costly to continue to repair. They're just not, every time they get fixed, they get broken. So the capital expense to replace all the air conditioners has been on the table for a while. At first, it was deferred simply because this was not a good year. We really need to optimize. But the deterioration of ADR, the deterioration of reviews that diminish your ADR have become so persistent, and so much inventory has been out of service because of the lack of having an air conditioner that's working in the room, that there's a large enough impact to the overall finances of the business that the decision finally got approved to replace the air conditioners. Usually what happens at that point is an unrealistic expectation of return back to ADR, but by that point, you've slipped down the hill so far, you have to rebuild your reviews, you have to rebuild your confidence, you have to rebuild your ADR, and you're catching up with the demand to market, and the demand to market has lowered ADR, so you don't really get back to where you had started been had you had done it sooner. That's a reality of long-term decisions finally reaching a head where they have to get fixed. The repair that is safety-minded is forced upon companies. Those that are made from operational perspective are usually forced upon because of revenue considerations. When you get to us as marketers, the amount of money that should be spent or spent on gets completely filtered through the optics of return on investment. And as we know, regardless of the depth of data that we get now and the diversity of it, who you ask how that gets accounted for is just as variable as what the data says. People are beginning to slowly understand that a number isn't just a number, in the sense of what it represents as it is how you want that number to identify what you're looking for. Let me take one step as an example. Attribution is a very key and powerful thing. Attribution is, do I give all the credit to the person that started the transaction? Do I give credit to everybody that was in line during the transaction? Or do I give the credit to the person at the end that caused the transaction? Final step. All too often, we have historically, because it used to be the only thing we could truly track, it was last click attribution was the baseline. Ignoring everybody beforehand, ignoring what channel created the interest or connection, ignoring anybody that contributed to the perpetual engagement of the guest. The person that sank the basket bucket gets all the credit. The rest of the basketball team is as if they weren't there. And we know that's untrue. So we've divided it into several ways of looking at data. And the three most common, consistent ones is still last click attribution, session-based. There is data-driven, which is the long string of everybody that touched it, which has to go to this algorithmic attribution as to, we'll get to that in a second. And then the third one is first click attribution. Who started this? The long tail one basically has to be mathed out as to volume and time in relationship to the entire arc of engagement. And then that value proportionately is assigned to each of the participants in that line. So you're not just dividing it equally amongst the 10 connection points or 20 connection points or however many it was. You're appropriating an amount based on which channel contributed based on length of time or frequency. Unless we get into all these other variations, but we're not going to get into that. We've had shows about attribution modeling. So I can say just simply go to hospitalitychannel.tv, query up attribution modeling and or analytics, and it'll pull up all the shows and you'll see that by title, which one was talking about the attribution modeling choices. So anyways, why do I bring all of this up? Is the numbers themselves, that number, we now put it into our data sets, and you can see that the same transaction can be seen in at least three different ways. If you see the revenue generated, that's fine. You understand the resultant of it. But who do you spend more money on to recreate that production depends on how you see the value of the data going in. If you look at first party attribution, you're looking at higher in the funnel. I want to get in front of people that start the dialogue with us. I want to get into places where social can sometimes be strong, that exposes us to people that were unaware of us. Boom. That's where your first click attribution strategy influences your marketing. I want to distribute based on value of channel, how much money I spend on each channel, knowing that my OTT channel represents this proportionate value of attribution based on my data string of the entire line. So I want to make sure that it stays very active because it's a very critical component in the discovery, education, conversion arc that my users experience. So that's where data-driven strategies affect your marketing choices. I want to keep to my paid ad campaigns because, or my meta search campaigns, or my organic campaigns, because that's the largest channel that shows me my contributions converting. And that's last click attribution marketing strategy. So you have these. Now, how does this relate to our topic of no time to keep up, too costly to fall behind? Reality of it is, this takes time to just do what we talked about. You're listening to a show 10 minutes in, and we've simply talked about what's something that most people have to evaluate every day. How is the progress of our efforts? And they look for markers. They look for things that indicate, are they going in the direction they want to? Is it going at the volume they want to? And is it at the pace that they want to? Those are three criteria whenever you look at a report. How are we doing? Well, our email campaign produced this. Okay, have we arced? Is it still going to continue to? Have we just seen the beginning of the production, or do we have it? If we're at the peak of production, it's going to fall off from this point. What's the remainder of value to this email campaign? We look at our paid campaigns. Okay, is it still producing at the same pace? Is the delta beginning to shift? It's still producing, but the production is diminishing compared to historically what it's done. Is that a trend, or is that just the time of day that I'm looking at it? That's another thing. These processes of doing this require time. Time from a person that understands what they're looking at and has the authority to influence what they see in the data. A lot of times you have people that are accumulating this or generating the reports, looking at the dashboards, and their job is done. They've produced the information to be used by somebody else. The somebody else, if they don't have the time because they're in an authoritative position and they're concerned with all the tasks that they have to do, then they may not take the time necessary to understand the data and make their interpretation. So we come into the world of AI, of systems that do what's called prescriptive. Excuse me, interpretive. We'll get to prescriptive in a second. Interpretive. They look at the data for you and they say, hey, you want to pay attention to this. This number is going down. It's still a positive number. I mean, if you look at the green good, red bad mentality, the number is still positive, still producing, but its production is beginning, based on historical, the delta variance is beginning to grow. You might consider what to do about these ad campaigns. Now, it could be as simple as the fact that the life cycle of the ad campaign is at its end and that it's expected to have diminished. And as a user that's knowledgeable about these things, you look at it and going, yeah, this makes sense. Nobody worry about that. The AI or the algorithm, really, it's not even AI at this point. The algorithm at this point doesn't know that. They're only reporting on what you've asked it to, which is show me changes past a certain margin that I should see without having to look at everything and find them. That's what the simple algorithm is that you've made it do. And that's helpful if you have the time. But that's the problem. You often don't have the time. And by the time you get to it, there's either a regret that you should have acted sooner on something. And that's not something you're going to share, because if you share that enough, then there's a question about your time management and your role. And maybe you're not qualified to do your role. So you keep this to yourself. So these mistakes are usually opaque mistakes. Most people don't know that you knew this and should have done something, but didn't. It gets transparent when the impact is happening and it was on your watch and you didn't catch it and somebody else pointed out that you should have. That's the transparent error. Those are the political fodder that goes back and forth in meeting rooms as to which department is not doing what it's supposed to do. And you try to avoid all of those, which goes back to our original point of self-preservation. So you have these time-consuming things. So we look at this and say, how can I help with the time-consuming thing? Can I hire another person that will do the looking for me and then give me the report that's more condensed, the executive summary of what I should be seeing to make decisions on? I'm in the decision process. I'm in the influencing decision process. I need to have the information that I need to make choices on. It's the uphill pyramid of data. The bottom of the pyramid has a massive amount of data, and then it gets correlated and prioritized until it gets to the decision levels that you're putting the 2 or 3 things that this person needs to focal on and make a choice or decision on, compared to all the things that didn't make it that far. So that's time consumption. A lot of people in the role of decision making don't even know what they don't know. They don't know what they should be looking at. They only know from familiarity what they have historically looked at. I constantly come across old and dead reports that the first question is, who looks at this? Well, everybody gets it. I didn't ask how it got distributed. I asked who actually looks at this. Well, everybody looks at it. Great. Show me the top 5 things you look at this. Well, I don't think there's 5 things. Show me the top things you look at. Tell me the thing you look at this report for, and tell me what you have. Now, as a reference point as to why I'm being adamant about the point, for those who used to get star reports and still do get star reports, they always look at tab 4, RevPAR. What's my RevPAR to market? How am I compared to the comp set that I've selected myself to be compared to? That's a key element of decision as to whether or not you're doing good or whether you have to adjust what you're doing. So when asked this, a lot of times reports, we find out most everybody doesn't look at it. The few that do look at it for 1 or 2 things. And for all the efforts to generate this report, its only real value is to say, if you ever want it, it's there on the shelf. Other than that, it's a relatively mundane report that doesn't really produce much value. So you want to tackle this, okay? But where do you start? Because now you're messing with something that everybody is familiar with, which means you're now responsible for it. Should it not do what you tried to make it do, then you'll be blamed for its failure and replacing something that had, quote, no problem. Or if you're successful, you are applauded for that, but then some people may not know or even have the ability without a proper education what to now look at it for. So it's a slippery slope of success still breeds problems, failure breeds problems. The key element to this no time, too costly to fall behind mentality is you have to make what you're using more useful. And this is why people have been looking at AI in a way of saying, can I, as my own user, create the ability to shortcut my time consumption efforts in a way that help me opaquely understand what's going on so as to not have to share what I do in front of everybody, good or bad, as to the numbers. They still can see the same information, but I have fine-tuned how I look at the data in a way that helps me make faster, better decisions. And that's where agentics have come in. That's where the idea of prescriptive modeling has come in. And what prescriptive modeling is a little bit similar to the insights you see on your dashboards to the side, where it says, hey, take notice, this variance changed to this variance. But the prescriptive aspect of it says, this you should spend more money in this ad account to compensate for this other ad account not producing as much as it once was. In other words, your XYZ special, which is only running for another few days, is on its tail end. Better to shift the money back up to the brand seasonal ad campaign that's generating well enough to compensate for the loss of the arc that the other program is falling down behind on. This prescriptive interpretation of the data now puts you in the role of seeing the data. If you want to go deeper, you can see it, but it gives you not only what you should look at it for, but what you might want to do about it. You don't have to agree with it because it's only basing on the data that you're having to see. You might look at it and go, no, I don't need to spend the money over because we're going to be launching a new campaign, which the AI doesn't know. And that's going to replace the diminishing campaign with a new campaign. So I don't need to do what it recommended, which was shift my monies over to my branding account to compensate for the loss of production from the specialty account. Instead, I'm going to be replacing the specialty account with a specialty account. But you see, you know that. And rather than going back 2 steps and looking at the data, looking at your paid campaigns, seeing that it's positive growth, but not knowing whether you should look at the individual campaigns to know whether they're all producing at the same level you expected them to. And if you do, then you have to go into each of the campaigns and see what they're doing, and then find out the one that you see that's not doing as well. But then you may not have the delta even. You may have to go over and see the numbers and say, well, how did that compare to last week? So then you're toggling, you're putting other dates, putting them in contrast. Oh, look, it is going down. All that time consumption to do that has now been taken care of by the agentic AI to get you to that point faster. That's one way to say, now I've adjusted how much time I consume to still do the things I'm responsible for. The people that have gotten to this point of doing these kind of things have increased the productivity. But then, as with anything, when you have abbreviated these kind of services and you have more time on your hands, it's amazing how quickly that time gets filled up with more things you didn't get to before that you now can, quote, get to. And so even as you create efficiencies, you expand your workload, or maybe expand it for you, more put onto you by those that you work with. And you fall yourself back in the same problem you were 2 steps ago, where you didn't have time to accomplish things. And that goes to the too costly to fall behind. Yes, taking the extra time to find the agentics and modeling the agentics to do these kind of insightful prescriptive things for you does take time, and that's getting easier and easier. But the real thing you have to solve is the too costly to fall behind is if you don't create better resource solutions to continue to grow your business even when businesses may not be growing. In other words, quote, steal business from your competitive set, or find other values of demand that can be brought to your market. You're still going to be running into the same problem that as companies not hitting their revenue threshold goals are going to look at ways to cost save themselves into the margins that the owners want from their investments. So you have to find ways to continue to cultivate additional businesses. Now, as the old saying goes, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, but you can't, there's only so much revenue that's possible if there's only so much demand to your market. And there's people, I will argue to this day, that say you can't generate demand. And I say, then you're not a good marketer. because you can. They said, well, the demand was always there, just you made it identified. No. Case in point, who started marketing bottled water? You figure the struggle uphill for that. So you want me to pay for what I get for free, and you're telling me the reasons why is because it's not healthy, even though my entire life I've been drinking this water, but you say I should buy the water in your bottles, create a pollution problem. But we didn't know about that back then. I'm going to pay for water in a bottle, even though I have it free out of the tap. Imagine the marketing challenge for that. They created the demand for their product. Airlines did that with air flights. Ocean liners did with ocean liners. They provided a service people didn't know they needed. Then they had to convince the people why the people needed it. Creates demand. We have to do the same for our own. And it's not just about having the rooms and the rates for them. It's about our presence in our market. It's about what's in our market. It's what we provide as value for our market. And a lot of people understanding what our market is. There's always a constant shifting of interest. We're always amazed when we see in the news how they categorize the generations of people born between certain years. Right now it's the alphas. And the alphas are very much about going back to malls. We thought malls were dead and done. We watched malls get razzed and destroyed. We saw malls deteriorate into moldy husks of what they once were. And now they're being reborn and have been reborn into variations that nobody 5 years ago would even have thought, 10 years ago, even less, as to what they could be as they are now. And they don't like the technology as much, even though they were born and raised on tablets in their cribs. They want touch contact. They go to stores to see the product, not just see it online. They know how to use it online better than we do, or as good, at least, at the very much. But they choose what they want. So there's always a shifting tide as to what people use and perceive. The idea of what people are willing to pay for is always in the first person. One of the first rules as a marketer that you always should maintain is don't sell to yourself, because you're not the only person wanting to buy the product you're representing. A lot of it has to do is discover what makes your product interesting to people and who would be those people that are interested in it. And it's amazing the diversity of these things. I remember years back, we had a very, very high upscale membership club resort on a really beautiful island in Florida. I won't go names or anything like that. And they had a very, very expensive, I mean, this is not for the weak of heart financially, membership threshold to be a part of it. And they decided, ownership did, that they wanted to have a temporary summer membership. And they had to get it past the original members, and they got convinced that they were going to do this. Still massively expensive. So they said, okay, Lauren, we want this summer membership, temporary summer membership. I'm sitting there going, okay, that's a lot of money for just having a few months of access to this place, but okay. Obviously, the first criteria looking at who would be talking to would be people financially capable of affording this monthly money to be a part in a short term for the resort. Secondly, some exclusions where the current membership would not be very helpful. To a point, we solicited the current membership, who wasn't overwhelmingly happy with the idea. They understood it, but they weren't overwhelmingly happy with it. Do you have any friends that don't want to be full members, but want to come down for a certain period out of the year and be part of the membership? Well, as friends of members, they get a lot of benefits. It wasn't worth the financial aspect, other than just pride of saying that they have their own relationship with the club. There wasn't a lot there. So then we started trying to divide out how people were looking at or who would be interested in these types of memberships. Very expensive. Well, people that are memberships of other prestigious clubs, this gives them a chance to come over and visit and participate in a new club. So it's also, and that's one of the sell points of maybe creating a long-term membership relationship by doing a short-term relationship. Yes and no. These clubs are expensive enough that for those that are on the bottom, they couldn't afford two clubs. For those on the top, it was justification of whether they're even interested in having multiple clubs or just show up and do whatever they want to do anyway. As it boils down, to not elongate the conversation, we found out that people that liked professional tennis that drove Mercedes-Benzes of at least a certain caliber quality, living in and around Atlanta, were high value. They were the ones that basically bought out all of these summer membership events or memberships, because they wanted a Florida club aspect. They were very much about their local prestigious tennis clubs, But this gave them an interesting part of the year that they could go down to Florida and live the life that they live while they're in Atlanta. And it was funny for that because that went through, in a very short or description, a huge elongated variation of, well, what do people identify persona wise? What do they drive? Do they have private jets? If so, what kind of private jets? Do they lease them or do they own them? What kind of vehicles do they drive? What kind of high size houses do they have? What zip codes in the United States would they be residing in? You know, the Jupiter Beach Islands and the Brickles in Miami and so forth. And all of this, we had all these different campaigns running around till we found out this magic little mix. Why I'm bringing all this up is this requires time, this requires money. And all of that is something that it has to be valued enough by the ownership to invest in you doing this to find this, but it also has to produce. You have to find the revenue and to create the demand you didn't know you had. These people did not know because we didn't have the product. Number one, we created the product and then created the demand for it. You can create demand. You can improve your revenue by expanding your perspective of who might be interested in what you have to sell. We talked about this last week when we talked about the demise of the airlines having the problem that they have with the governmental shutdown. That's getting passe as they begin to rebuild back what they're doing. But talking about from a redefined marketing strategy, the drive markets were very sliced and segmented at that point. You had people that were flat out not going to travel because they just felt it wasn't worth the effort. Then you had the people that still wanted to travel, but they don't know what options they want to exercise or what that travel represents or what they want to do. Then you had people that were still trying to get to where they wanted to go. From all of that, we talked about the fact that some people would drive and stay within their immediate area. Hey, we're not going to go great distances to grandma's house this Thanksgiving, but maybe we can find something to do that doesn't keep us in the house locally. We just find a nice place to go to. There's those people. Then you have people saying, look, it's only a few hours away. Let's just get there. And those people are marketable from your radiant from where you are. Then you have it's like, well, we're going to spend all day to get there and get there in the evening. And that has a radiant of people that are willing to travel. And then you had the people that are like, well, it's pretty far, but let's find an intermediary point that we're going to stop. And we talk about the marketing strategy associated with that. Where are you the point B between A and C for people? How far is it that people are traveling to and from that you're a nice place to stop by? And we even talked about the fact that even if you are the destination and it's an all-day tripper that comes in, then tell them to stay, crash there rather than showing up at some family member's doorstep at midnight. Crash, get up in the morning, have a nice breakfast, so to speak, and then show up all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at your family's house that you're going to stay that point forward at. These were all logics. And then, of course, the one that was new to our conversation was the long hauler, where they have to have multi-stays because they're traveling in excess of 750 to 1,000 miles, and that requires multi-days to travel. And they're doing that because they're trying to avoid the headaches of the flights. That still may be the case for the remainder of our fourth quarter. I'm not taking that off the table. But this type of strategy changes come from the need of trying to not fall behind on the revenues that you can create. So the idea of saying no time to keep up, too costly to fall behind isn't just about your own time management and your own skill improvement. A lot of it has to do with your constant ability to be better at what you're doing, to find more revenue, and become more efficient at what it takes to go over and run the revenue you're getting. There's a value of interpretation of that as well. So when you look at what you're getting into for this last fourth quarter, the demands of the changes to the market that you're experiencing right now for this last part of the year, as you look at to what the transition to 2026 will be into the first quarter, and all the complexities that are going on in the politics and economics and cultural and everything else that's going on, you have to see how you can unburden some of your functionality into a more automated process. And you have to see if there's different ways of looking at the data that you have looked at 1,000 times in the same way. We get into being creatures of habit where we see the numbers, we look at the numbers, we become very comfortable in this pattern of that means this means RevPAR means that. Okay, ADR, market down, it's here. You go very quickly. Like, let me get past that. I want to be aware of it. I want to know it. but I don't often sit and mull over it because I have so many other things I have to do. I would say break those molds while towards the end of now till the end of the year. Stop in a second and say, why do I keep asking the same question? Is this still the right question to ask? Like I told you about the old reports. We always make that report. Oh, who uses it? I don't know, but everybody gets it. Well, what do you use? What parts do you use it for? Well, I really don't look at it unless there's something that's going on that I need to, somebody told me about and I got to go look at something. Whatever it is, change your patterns of how you do things for nothing more than to just reconfirm that that pattern is the best choices to make. Takes time, yes. But right now, given the flux of what's going on for the fourth quarter and all the variables that are going on, it's a good chance to kind of shake things up yourself and say, okay, let me take a moment. What's a different way of looking at what I'm looking at? Is there? Or am I looking at the only one way I can? See if there's other sources of data that you didn't know because you haven't been keeping up on all the latest productions. Like you've given yourself enough time. Oh, I'll get to that when I get the chance. I'll research that. When on my free time, I'll go over and catch up with that. Stop for a moment and say, well, that's been going on for a few months, if not all year. What really has changed that I might be interested in? Strangely, it's easier for us to discover these things, especially with AI, by literally asking about variations and changes. Is there software that makes this easier? Is there a function that does this? Any articles related to such and such? Or what's been the five most impactful things? You can literally ask these types of questions now. Could you have done it at a certain page? Yes, but what usually happens at that point is, it's interpretive as to how the content that's indexed on there is relevant to the specific question that you have. With AI, they're trying to answer the specific question. So you get a little bit more constructive, granular data, grain of salt, making sure it's not created data, that it's actual data reference. When we go for the research of a Perplexity or Claude that shows you the addendum as to where it pulled the data, for what reason it pulled the data. But take your time to look at it and say, okay, so what is that? Should I take more time learning what agentic AI is? I hear it all the time. It's a buzzword. A lot of times people use buzzwords simply so they want to sound like they're keeping up when all they're all is using the word that they heard. If you ask them what it really is, they might give you some contrived top line TLDR kind of stuff, comment about it. That's where buzzwords come from. They're buzzwords. They use the word, they don't know what it means. So take the time to understand a little bit more in depth as to what agentics really is. Creating agentic AI for yourself, or automations, or RTLAs for you. These kind of things can help do the efficiencies that we're talking about. They can be the gap point to making you be more efficient at what you're doing, so that you will naturally take on more capabilities because you have become more efficient at the things you were running before, which makes you the differentiator between those and other people that aren't. Which going forward, depending upon what happens with our economy and our industry in general, trend or not, may make the divine difference of you still sitting in your chair versus an empty chair next to you, compared to them sitting in their chair and your chair's empty. So take the time to catch up now while we're wrapping up the end of the year. See how that affects your perspective of what you're going to step into next year with. And look at the idea that it is time to keep up and that it's not too costly to fall behind. It's too costly to get too far ahead. And I mean that in the sense that don't go so far into this that you're talking about things that have yet to come and took all the time to figure out that you're way ahead of where you can actually use it. I do that a lot. So anyways, as always, we thank you for watching the show live around the world in 209 countries that we're broadcasting in. Also for catching us on Hospitality Radio. Our listenership in Hospitality Radio has been progressively growing larger. Thank you so much for that. We're on 37 different global platforms, digital radio station, or digital networks, radio stations around. We're our own radio station, but digitally distributed in 37 different platforms. Our podcast is in 39 countries. We translate the show in 11 languages. We are simulcasted on many of our industry associations pages, as well as a lot of our corporate relationships. They love our content. They put it on their social media pages for Facebook, for YouTube, their channels. LinkedIn is still only one source. That's LinkedIn's restriction. Not that we couldn't be on others. It's just LinkedIn only allows the broadcasting on one channel, and that is my channel for Loren Gray. Thank you for catching us on that. A lot of people catch us on LinkedIn. Should you have any questions about content of the show, questions about what we've discussed, that you would like us to discuss, any disagreements, you can always reach me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. If you are a hospitality marketer and want to join our peer level engagement group, you can join us at hospitalitymarketing.club. And for all of our reruns and shows, both for the podcast and the live show here, you can go to hospitalitychannel.tv. Our app is on Apple and Google Play, just look for Hospitality Channel. It's always the show's on the free side of the pay gateway, and also your smart TVs, as being a TV channel that we are, you can catch Hospitality Channel TV, HCTV, on your smart TVs, Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple, all of them. You just look for Hospitality Channel and load it onto your TV, and you'll always get our show. And if you want to pay for the content, like you do Netflix, to get behind on the other content, there is a whole pile of content there as well. So that's about all the places to find us. For all those in all of the countries that aren't watching us live and all the other varied time zones, we do recast this show at 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian, and London time for our APAC and European and Mideast friends accordingly. If you want to talk to me audibly, you can go to htm.news/talkback. I always leave a question of the week on there, usually related to what the show topic will be. And you can also give me your audio feedback as to thoughts and comments and opinions, and answer the question if you want to or whatever. So it gives us the insights that we usually talk about for the show. So with all that in mind, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time and look forward to talking to you all next week.